Okay, so you want to own a sports betting company. You've seen the ads. Every single Sunday, every single game, every single commercial break. DraftKings, FanDuel, BetMGM, all of them throwing money at you like confetti at a parade. You watch those ads and your brain does the math almost automatically. Millions of people are betting. The house always wins. These companies are collecting a cut of every single dollar wagered. You don't even need a product. You don't manufacture anything. You don't ship anything. People hand you money, they lose, and you keep it. That's the whole business. That's the whole thing. And you think, if I could just get a piece of that, I'd be set for life. Here's the problem. The sports betting business is one of the most expensive, most legally complicated, most operationally brutal industries you can enter. Companies have burned through $1 billion and still haven't turned a profit. The math that looks so simple from the outside is quietly doing something much darker on the inside. You start with the obvious part, the house edge. In sports betting, it's called the VIG or the juice, and it's the reason the sportsbook doesn't need to be right about who wins the game. You don't need to predict the future. You just need to price both sides of a bet so that no matter what happens, you collect a little more than you pay out. Take a coin flip. Both sides should pay even money. But a sportsbook will offer you slightly worse than even money on both sides. You bet $11 to win 10. That gap, that tiny mathematical sliver between what you risk and what you win, is where the money lives. Across millions of bets, that sliver becomes a river. The VIG on a typical sports wager runs somewhere around 4 to 5%, meaning for every $100 wagered through your platform, you theoretically keep $4 to $5 and pay out the rest. It sounds like nothing. And then you look at the numbers and realize the total amount wagered legally in the United States in 2023 was somewhere north of $100 billion. 4% of $100 billion is $4 billion. That's just the rake. That's before you even count parlays, props, in-game betting, boosted odds, all the products specifically engineered to widen that edge. So you think, okay, I want in, and that's when the real education starts. The first thing you need is a license. Not one license, licenses. Because sports betting in America isn't regulated at the federal level. It's regulated state by state, and every single state has different rules, different fees, different application processes, and different timelines. New York charges operators 25% of gross gaming revenue as a tax. 25%. That means for every $100 in revenue your platform generates in New York, you hand $25 directly to the state government before you've paid a single employee, a single server bill, a single customer acquisition cost. Pennsylvania is around 36% on online sports betting, and the license application fee alone in some states will run you into the millions. You want to operate nationally? You're not applying for one license. You're running 50 separate regulatory relationships simultaneously, and the moment you slip up in one of them, you face fines, suspensions, or outright revocation. Your compliance department isn't a side function. It's a core business unit that costs you tens of millions of dollars a year to run. Now here's where the math starts getting genuinely unsettling. You build your platform, you launch. You have a functioning sportsbook and the licensing to operate in 10 states. And on day one, nobody comes. Because the sports betting market has a problem that almost nobody talks about. The cost to acquire a customer is absolutely brutal. DraftKings spent an average of somewhere between $300 and $400 acquiring each new depositing customer during their early growth phase. FanDuel was running similar numbers. That means before a single new user has placed their first bet, you've already spent $400 on them, in ads, in promotions, in deposit bonuses, in free bets. The industry calls these promotional credits promos, and for years, the top platforms were essentially paying people to sign up. You deposit $100. We give you $100 in free bets. You bet with our money first. You see how that works. You're not acquiring a customer, you're renting one. And here's what makes it worse. Those customers you paid $400 for, a significant portion of them are what the industry calls bonus hunters. They come in for the promo, they clear the bonus, they withdraw whatever they won, and they leave. They never intended to stay. They used your promotional dollars as a tool. Your acquisition number of $400 just bought you zero long-term value. The lifetime value calculation, the thing every business on earth has to solve, is especially brutal in sports betting because the population of truly loyal high-frequency bettors is actually much smaller than the top of the funnel suggests. The recreational bettor bets on the Super Bowl and maybe the playoffs. They deposit $50, have some fun, lose most of it, and don't come back until next season. The whale, the customer who bets every single day, deposits thousands, and actually moves the revenue needle, is rare. And every single one of your competitors is going after that same person with everything they have. So you're spending $400 to acquire customers, a meaningful fraction of whom immediately churn. The ones who stay are fighting to keep, and the revenue you're generating from the ones who stay is being taxed at anywhere from 10 to 36%, depending on the state, before it reaches your operating budget. Now layer on technology costs. Building a sportsbook from scratch is genuinely one of the most technically demanding products in consumer software. You're setting lines on hundreds of games simultaneously. You're processing in-game bets in real time, which means your odds need to update in milliseconds as the game changes. A running back breaks through the line for a big gain. Your live betting odds on the next play need to adjust before a sharp bettor exploits the stale number. If your tech lags, the sharp bettors, people who bet for a living and know exactly how to find a temporarily mispriced line, will eat you alive. They're not your customers. They're your predators. This is where the whole narrative flips. You thought the house always wins. And in aggregate at scale, yes, the VIG means you're always slightly ahead mathematically. But sports betting is not a casino. In a casino, every bet is independent. The roulette wheel doesn't care who just won. In sports betting, a particularly sharp bettor can systematically and repeatedly find lines that are mispriced and them profitably over thousands of games. These are called sharps or professionals, and the top sportsbooks actively manage their exposure to them. They limit their accounts. They restrict their bet sizes. They move lines to protect themselves. Some books even use sharp action as a signal. If the sharp money is flooding onto one side, you move the line not because you want to, but because you don't want to be on the wrong side of people who actually do this for a living. The business of setting lines is itself a full-time professional enterprise. Most mid-sized sportsbooks don't even set their own lines. They buy them from a handful of line-setting services that essentially provide the mathematical spine of the entire industry. Your technology costs, your licensing costs, your compliance costs, your customer acquisition costs. All of these are happening simultaneously, and they all scale with the size of the operation you're trying to build. You want to be in 15 states, not 5. Because fixed costs like platform maintenance and executive salaries don't scale proportionally with state count. More states means more revenue to spread those fixed costs across, which is why every major operator spent the years immediately after PASPA's repeal in 2018 in a furious, expensive land grab. PASPA, the Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act, was the federal law that effectively banned sports betting outside Nevada. When the Supreme Court struck it down in May 2018, it opened a door that every major operator in the world ran toward at the same time. The race wasn't to be the most profitable operator. The race was to capture market share before it calcified. Because the data from every other mature betting market in the world, the UK, Australia, Europe, showed that sports betting tends toward monopoly or near monopoly. The top 1 or 2 players capture the majority of the market. Everyone else fights over the scraps. And that's why DraftKings and FanDuel burned through billions of dollars. Not because they were reckless, because the investment thesis was, we lose money now, we capture the market, and then when the promotional war ends and the market matures, we collect the VIG on an enormous loyal customer base. Forever. That's the thesis. Spend now, collect later. It's the same thesis Amazon ran for years. The question is whether you have the capital and the nerve to hold on until later actually arrives. By 2022, the financial reality started biting hard. DraftKings posted a net loss of approximately $1.3 billion that year. These are not rounding errors. These are real losses, and they're being watched by investors who funded this experiment on the premise that the losses were temporary. When DraftKings and FanDuel eventually started pulling back on promotions, reducing free bets, tightening bonus structures, raising the wagering requirements, the market responded in an interesting way. Churn went up for a moment, then stabilized. The customers who stayed after the free money dried up were actually the real customers, the ones with genuine interest in sports betting as an activity, not just as a bonus extraction mechanism. And when you look at the retention numbers on that core group, they actually look pretty healthy. The loyal, recreational bettor who bets NFL games every week and checks their app every Sunday isn't going anywhere. That person is deeply habitual, and habits in consumer software are worth a tremendous amount over time. The international dimension is a whole other layer. The largest sports betting companies in the world aren't American. Flutter Entertainment, the Irish parent company of FanDuel, has been running profitable, scaled sportsbooks in the UK and Australia for decades. Bet365, the UK-based operator that is privately owned by the Coates family, generates billions in revenue annually and is considered one of the most technologically sophisticated betting platforms on earth. These companies came into the American market with institutional knowledge. They had already run the customer acquisition wars, already built the compliance infrastructure, already survived the regulatory scrutiny in multiple other markets before touching American soil. Competing against them, if you're starting from zero, isn't a technology problem or a capital problem alone. It's a knowledge problem. They know things about this business that took them 15 years of operational experience to learn. You're trying to build in 5. There is, however, a tier of this business that doesn't require you to be DraftKings. It's called the B2B layer, and it's where a completely different kind of sports betting company lives. These are the companies that build the infrastructure everyone else runs on. The odds feed providers, the platform software companies, the payment processing solutions built specifically for gambling, the risk management tools, the KYC, know your customer verification systems that let you comply with anti-money laundering regulations across different jurisdictions. If you build any one of those components exceptionally well, every sportsbook in the world is a potential customer. You're not competing with FanDuel, you're selling to FanDuel. Your margins are software margins, high, scalable, and not dependent on winning a customer acquisition war. Companies like Sportradar, which provides data and technology to sportsbooks globally, went public at a valuation of nearly $8 billion. They don't take a single bet. They just make it possible for others to take bets efficiently and safely. This is the part of the sports betting economy that doesn't make it into the ads and the stadium naming rights deals. The plumbing, the picks and shovels play. In every gold rush, someone gets rich selling picks and shovels to the miners, whether the miners find gold or not. The infrastructure layer of sports betting is one of the more interesting places to look if you want exposure to this industry's growth without running the customer acquisition gauntlet yourself. And then there's the affiliate business, which is its own entire ecosystem. Sports betting affiliates are media companies, websites, podcasts, YouTube channels, apps that drive traffic to sportsbooks in exchange for a cut of the revenue those referred customers generate. The affiliate doesn't run a book. The affiliate doesn't take any betting risk. The affiliate just produces content that sports bettors want to consume, embeds referral links, and collects a revenue share that can run anywhere from 15 to 40% of net gaming revenue from each referred player for life. The top sports betting affiliates generate tens of millions of dollars per year. They have virtually no regulatory exposure compared to an operator. Their marginal cost is close to zero after the content is produced, and their revenue scales with every new state that opens up legal sports betting, because every new state represents a new wave of customers who need to be educated on which app to download. Here's the number that ties all of this together. The American Gaming Association estimated that in 2023, Americans wagered approximately $119 billion on sports legally. That produced approximately $11 billion in gross gaming revenue for operators. The revenue before expenses, before taxes, before anything. $11 billion in a single year from a market that was essentially zero in 2018. And legal sports betting still only represents a fraction of total sports wagering in America. Because illegal bookmaking, your neighborhood bookie, offshore sites, has existed for decades and still captures a meaningful share of volume. As enforcement tightens and more states legalize, that illegal volume doesn't disappear. It migrates. It moves to legal platforms. The addressable market for legal operators is still expanding. But even with $11 billion in gross gaming revenue, the major publicly traded operators were still fighting their way to consistent profitability as recently as 2023. Because $11 billion in revenue, distributed across multiple major operators, after you pay the taxes, the technology, the compliance teams, the marketing and service, the debt you took on to build all of this, is not automatically a profitable business. It's an enormous business. It's a growing business. Whether it becomes a reliably profitable business depends entirely on whether customer acquisition costs normalize, whether the promotional war stays at a manageable temperature, and whether the regulatory environment doesn't become so punitive in high revenue states that the math simply breaks. New York is the case study people keep pointing to. It has the highest state tax on sports betting revenue in the country, at 51%, not 25-51, and yet every major operator still operates there because the sheer volume of bettors in New York makes even a brutalized margin worth something. You lose half your revenue to the state, and you still show up because not being in New York means ceding that volume to competitors who are. The competitive logic forces you into markets where the economics are genuinely poor because the alternative is worse. What that means for you, thinking about this business clearly, is that sports betting is not a single business. It's a stack of businesses sitting on top of each other. At the top is the consumer-facing sportsbook, which is high profile, high marketing spend, and still in a brutal fight for profitability. Beneath that is the technology and data layer, which is quieter, harder to see, but structurally excellent as a business. And woven through everything is the affiliate and media layer, which captures value from the industry's growth without absorbing its operational pain. The house does win. But the house also spends $1 billion building itself before it collects a single dollar of reliable profit. The VIG is real. The edge is real. The scale of the opportunity is real, and the complexity, the regulatory gauntlet, the cost of customers, the sharpness of the competition, all of that is equally real and equally important to understand before you put a single dollar into this business. Every time you see that ad on Sunday, the free bet, the deposit match, the celebrity endorsement, what you're actually seeing is a company spending $20 to $40 in marketing cost just to get you to click. And they're doing that because they believe that click is worth more than $40 over the course of your relationship with their platform. Sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong, but they keep running the ads because the alternative, losing market share to a competitor who does run the ads, is a risk they can't accept. That ad isn't a sign that the business is easy. That ad is evidence of just how hard the business actually is. The real money in sports betting has never been in being right about who wins on Sunday. It's been in understanding the structure well enough to find where the money actually flows, and positioning yourself to touch that flow before it disappears. If this kind of breakdown is what you're looking for, the actual mechanics behind industries that look one way on the surface and work completely differently underneath, stick around. There's a lot more where that came from.